Sherlock Holmes, A Case of Identity, Part 1, An Interesting Case. Sherlock Holmes and I were sitting near the fireplace in our Baker Street lodgings. "Would you like a pinch of snuff, Watson?" asked Holmes. The detective held out a gold snuff box with a large amethyst in the center of the lid. The ornate box was such a contrast to Holmes's simple way of life that I had to comment on it. "Where did you get this snuff box?" I asked. "It's a little present from the King of Bohemia in return for my assistance with the Irene Adler case." "And the ring?" I asked, glancing at the remarkable diamond that sparkled upon his finger. "It was from the reigning family of Holland for helping with a matter of extreme delicacy," said Holmes. "I can't confide the details to anyone, not even you, my dear Watson." "Are you working on anything special right now?" I asked him. "I have 10 or 12 cases that are important," he replied, "but none of them are interesting." Holmes rose from his chair and went over to the window. "However, I may soon have an interesting one. Look down there on the sidewalk." I went over to the window. A tall young woman stood across the street. She was wearing a black jacket trimmed with matching beads and fringe. Her gray broad-brimmed straw hat was accented with a red feather, and a heavy fur boa was wrapped around her neck. "She seems to have some money, although not the best taste in clothing," I commented. The woman nervously peeped at our windows and played with the buttons on her gloves. Suddenly, she plunged across the street and rang our doorbell. In a few moments, our landlady, Mrs. Hudson, announced our visitor, Miss Mary Sutherland. Holmes welcomed the woman and asked her to sit down. Then he studied her for a minute. "With your poor eyesight, do you find that it's difficult to use a typewriter for so many hours a day?" he asked. "I did at first, but now I know where the letters are without looking," Miss Sutherland said quickly. Then, suddenly realizing what Holmes had said, she looked at him with both fear and astonishment in her eyes. "How did you know all that about me?" she asked. "I have trained myself to see what others overlook," said Holmes. "There is a small dent on either side of your nose that could only be made by eyeglasses. Your dress sleeves have purple velvet cuffs. I can see a line a little above your wrist where a typist would press her arm against the table." "I'm impressed," I said. "I also noticed that Miss Sutherland must have left home in a hurry this morning because she is wearing 2 boots that do not match," said Holmes. "Plus, one boot is fastened only at the first and second buttons, and the other at the first, third, and fifth buttons. But never mind all this. It's my business to notice these things. Why have you come to consult me, Miss Sutherland?" Looking a bit dazed by Holmes's powers of observation, Miss Sutherland blurted out her reasons for appearing at our lodgings. "A friend recommended you because you found her husband after the police had assumed he was dead," she replied. "Oh, Mr. Holmes, I wish you could do the same for me. I have an income of £100 per year in addition to the money I make with my typewriter. I would give it all to know what has become of Mr. Hosmer Angel." "Why were you in such a hurry to come here this morning?" asked Holmes. "Mr. Windibank, that is my father, would not go to the police and he would not consult you," said Miss Sutherland. "He wouldn't do anything and kept saying no harm had been done. That made me so angry that I just threw on my things and came straight here." "You and your father have different last names," said Holmes. "Mr. Windibank must be your stepfather." "Yes, he is my stepfather. I call him my father, although that sounds strange because he's only 5 years older than I am." "And your mother is alive?" "Oh yes, mother is alive and well. I wasn't pleased when she married again so soon after father's death, especially when she married a man 15 years younger than herself." Miss Sutherland explained that her father had been a plumber with a profitable business. With the help of the foreman, her mother continued running the business. "But when she married Mr. Windibank, he made her sell it," said Miss Sutherland. "He is in the wine business, working for the importers Westhouse and Marbank of Fenchurch Street. He felt that the plumbing business was beneath him socially." "Did your mother and stepfather get a good price for the business?" I asked. "They didn't get nearly as much as my father would have if he were alive," she replied. I expected Holmes to be impatient with these minor details, but he listened with the greatest concentration. "Your own little income of £100 a year," said Holmes. "Did that come out of the plumbing business?" "Oh, no, sir. It was left to me by my uncle who died in New Zealand." "I believe that a single woman can live quite nicely on £60 a year," said Holmes. "Yet between your inheritance and your typing income, you have more than that." Miss Sutherland explained that she could easily live on less than £60 a year. But she handed over to her stepfather the full £100 plus her typing income. "You must understand, Mr. Holmes, that as long as I live at home, I don't want to be a burden to my parents," she said. "Of course, they only have that money while I continue to live with them." "You have made your position clear," said Holmes. "Now tell us all about your connection to Mr. Hosmer Angel." A flush stole over Miss Sutherland's face, and she picked nervously at the fringe on her jacket. "I met him at the plumber's ball," she said. "Mr. Windibank did not want Mother and me to go. He never likes me to go anywhere. In fact, he gets quite angry if I even suggest anything as innocent as a Sunday school picnic. But I was determined to go. What right did he have to keep me from enjoying myself?" "I can't understand his objections at all," I said. "He said that the people at the ball would be beneath us socially," said Miss Sutherland. "And he tried to argue that I had nothing suitable to wear, but I had a new dress that I'd never even worn." Mr. Windibank finally stopped arguing with her only because his employer sent him to France on business. "So Mother and I went to the ball in the company of our former foreman," said Miss Sutherland. "And it was there that I met the gentleman called Mr. Hosmer Angel."
Little Fox.